guys, Eric Cogorno here with Performance Golf, and I'm with the short game master himself, Mr. Derek Diminsky. Thanks for being here today.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you. Derek came out from Arizona. Derek, well known in the golf community in my world, is one of the best short game, in particular, coaches and players. To me, you should see the guy spin the golf ball. You're going to see in some future videos. One of the best coaches in the world. In today's video, if you're someone who's struggled around the greens with your chipping and pitching like I have for a long time, today's video is going to really help you. We're trying to give you the easiest, really simplest method to get the ball consistently on the green and close to the hole. We're going to give you some technique stuff to start, and then the number one skill that ultimately you want to build right after. We'll show you that as well. So Derek, we've got a shot here on the side of the green. We're kind of just off the green. We're maybe, you know, 20, 25 yard.
Yeah.
A very typical, you know, shot we would have. So if I came in to see you and I said, hey, I'm really struggling with this shot, can you kind of walk me through what the easiest way would be technique-wise to get this consistently close to the hole? I assume we would start with how we set up to the ball.
Yeah, exactly. So in setup, where it's a little bit different than full swing, right? We don't have to be so athletic. So in short game in general, I like students to be relatively close to the ball, relatively comfortable. So we don't have to be, and again, Adam Scott's a great player. You see his full swing, he's very athletic. But in short game, we can get kind of tall, close, and comfortable because this isn't a massively athletic event, so we don't have to feel that way.
Love it. And in terms of getting close to the ball, I would assume most people that come in probably live on the too far away from the ball spectrum.
Yeah, it's tailored to the individual, correct? But if I'm so far away, that can start putting this club offline, and then disaster can strike from there.
Yeah, more variable. So if you would take a setup for us
for sure.
to this hole in the back and kind of walk us through, okay, we want to get tall, comfortable, a little closer to the ball. What are we doing in terms of ball position, weight distribution, club face angle?
Yeah, so I like a setup like this for anyone to check themselves, because before you know it, this ball can start creeping back or forward, and we can really start to get off just through setup. So we really want to make sure we check those boxes. In general, in this short game pitch, right, to just hit it, you know, 10 to 15 yard carry, something with the ball relatively in the middle. We would prefer some amount of weight forward and or moving forward through the shot. You can use a normal grip and with just a little bit of shaft lean as well.
So in terms of the ball position, one of the things I kind of like you showed in the Stealth Secrets program, which we'll talk about too, is how the ball you really want to have pretty much under the sternum, almost regardless of where the sternum location is. And so I think for the player watching, that's sort of an easy reference point. Yeah,
it's just because at times, like if I set up here and I say, okay, where's this ball position, right? And people will say, oh, that's way forward. And then I say, well, now where is it?
Yeah.
And they say, so is the ball really moving? Well, not so much. So in general, we want to make sure we don't have any excess tilts in our body, so we're pretty neutral to start.
Yep.
And as I just tilt forward, yes, like generally under the sternum is a great place to have it. So if we do want to have the ball a little forward, we would offset it with a little bit of lean, just to make sure it's not really getting out of reach.
Got it. And Derek, let's hit one to that back pin just for them to see that, and then we'll kind of we'll work through some more of the little details there. Yeah. So we're tall, kind of close and comfy.
Yeah, and I always recommend doing a few practice strokes to start feeling the ground, feeling the motion, especially as if someone were to implement some change here, just to start feeling what they would want to do for this shot. So yeah, it's going to be about a 10 to 15 yard carry. I always recommend making sure we do hit from good lies, but feeling the motion we want to feel. Getting set.
And then in terms of the weight distribution, like you mentioned, because that's a common one that comes up, if you were to put a number on it, are we talking like 55, 60 on the left, something in that framework?
There's really two schools of thought here. So you can keep it 60, 40, 70, 30. A couple things that we want to monitor is we don't want it so forward that we would have to back out of the shot. And or you can keep it some amount of 50-50 and feel like you move through the shot. So those are really two keys. We just want to avoid any type of tilting back, any type of backing out of the shot where that can move our low point back and we can start miscontacting the ball.
Okay, got it. Yeah, let's hit another one.
So same thing, feel the shot. Gotta fly this one just
tall,
a bit
close,
further.
And comfortable.
Yeah,
like
tall,
that.
close, and comfortable.
Yeah.
Non-athletic, kind of like my build.
Feet are pretty close together there, right?
Yeah, comfortably close, right?
Yep.
I wouldn't want them so close to where I just can't feel like I can't move or balance. nor would I have to be too wide, but I'd still give the student freedom to experiment.
Yeah.
At times, if someone does feel comfortable and they get great results really doing anything, that's fine. But in general, because we don't need massive body movement or anything like that, the closer the better.
Got it. And then in terms of the handle location, you know, if we've got the golf ball kind of relatively under the sternum, because you see different variations, and obviously there's different shots. We'll talk through trajectories in a later video. But for this sort of stock medium trajectory shot with the ball in that position, we're looking, you know, maybe the handle just slightly forward towards the target.
Yeah, I'd say somewhat covering the front of the ball. 5 to 10 degrees of shaft lean is a generally good place to start.
Yeah.
If we want to hit this pitch and make sure we don't dig too much, you know, we don't want too much lean, nor would we want the handle too far back, especially for just a mid shot like this, middle trajectory.
Okay, let's do one more like that. And what would you say in terms of like good chippers and pitchers here, of players who struggle with their chipping, what percentage have a great setup and struggle with chipping?
So that's always the first check, because it's usually the first domino to fall. If I see someone in here set up like this, I usually don't have to ask them why they're here to see me. I know why.
Yeah.
So to make sure we can check all the boxes, that our setup's correct, we'll start talking about how the club moves.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a lot of time in a pitching action, somewhat like with putting, where I don't need this massive amount of movement or this kind of wild Matt Wolff, Jim Furyk style. I just don't have enough time to get this club too far offline.
Yeah.
So making sure the setup's pretty neutral, making sure the swing, plane, and club face are pretty neutral, because when people struggle, they're usually wildly off in those areas. So if someone's struggling, just know it's probably not them, it's that their form is not good.
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
So it's not their skill, it's just the way that they're using the club is a way that's sometimes borderline unusable.
Yeah, those are all really good. Obviously, you make that look easy, like anyone who's great at what they do does. Let's say the player gets a good setup. Okay, they're kind of tall, close, and comfortable. They've got the ball fairly in the middle. You know, the handle's pretty good. The feet are close. In the backswing, I saw in your program, there's really seemed to be two biggies that you wanted to keep an eye on, which is really the swing plane and the club face. So maybe can you talk us through, like, what are we trying to do in terms of swing plane and club face, and maybe some common faults and fixes?
Yeah, so I would say, in general, once we have that great setup, and that's where this stick comes into play, we want that closer to our feet. Just because if I wasn't here and it was only just this club and we were going to that pin, this club, right, it would want to have some amount of up and around. So you can see from that back view here, it's going to be just about over that stick. Very commonly, and this is where some of the no wrist stuff gets people in trouble. Very commonly, if I have no wrist in this, you know, big turn, this club gets too low, too inside, too shut, and you really can't chip or pitch from there.
Yeah.
So to feel like this club maybe does open just a little bit, I can use some wrist to help that, but club generally in line then with my feet is a very neutral way where I can get the contact I want and send the ball online.
And for those watching, Derek, if you take your setup there, kind of what we're talking about here, maybe we can put this on the screen. If you were to draw a shaft plane line, right?
Cool,
like,
perfect.
Yeah, right up the line of Derek's shaft. So if you go ahead and take a setup there.
Yeah.
And let's say we draw that line on the screen. We're really just looking to get that club riding pretty close to that line.
Exactly. Great short gamers tend to stay slightly on top. You can be slightly below, but you don't want to be too far below or too far above.
And when you say on top, that would be like a little outside.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
Okay,
just the slightest a bit on top. But if you're close to that line, you're going to be in a good place.
And why not, Derek, let's hit one. And why don't we have the line on the screen for this one as well, just to kind of see the shaft plane on the line.
Yeah.
And so if we stay relatively on that plane, like you mentioned, the swing's pretty short. We don't have a lot of time. We don't want to be doing big plane shifts. If we stay relatively on that plane with a club face, let's say that's fairly neutral, that would give us the best odds of success, the easiest way to do it.
When people struggle, they're struggling, they've maybe been struggling for years and they don't use a camera, I would highly recommend getting that shaft plane or just even visualizing it, right? Visualizing that plane. And as I see people who really struggle, they tend to be way offline. As I see them get more online, it just always tends to help.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's kind of it's a mandatory thing in my book. So yeah, if there's this line here, this is where I see a lot of people, and you don't want to be there, But if we can stay on top of that line, for some it might feel like a small fade pattern. And that allows me, even there, if I hit a little bit behind it, I can still move it because I'm not too far behind if I'm too low and inside, and I'm not too steep into the ground.
I think it's similar, you know, in a lot of full swing areas. It's not even necessarily for you guys as much about how good your good shots are. It's a lot more of like when you don't hit one perfect, how bad the bad are. And all these pieces we're trying to stack in are really to make the bad shots even better.
Exactly.
So let's say you get the setup correct. Let's say they're on plane, they got the club face fairly neutral. You know, you talk in your program on the way through about making sure the body motions are correct, right? Letting the body motions guide, getting in that great finish position.
The great players, pitchers, chippers are usually measured as the body somewhat coasts through with the club. Now, can there be some outliers, and is there some players that may find just using some hands or using more body can help? Sure, but in general, once we get this club set, and something else I see where people struggle is, when I move this club back, there's not a massive movement, there's not a massive shift. My weight can stay fairly forward in general. I set this club, and then there is more movement through with the body than back. I don't want to get stuck behind the golf ball. Just like in a full swing, it's this somewhat online, fairly minimal motion, if you would. Again, I'm not having this massive hip turn, shoulder turn. I'm getting this club set, and then from here I can deliver it with some body turn through to the target.
Yeah, let's hit another one, Derek, and kind of maybe a couple of the checkpoints. I like your reference of, you know, when you get done, let's make sure that the belt buckle and the shirt buttons are at the target.
Exactly.
Kind of have the club pointed back towards you, arms a little left.
Yeah, so I would have people just make that motion, because so often when that ball's there,
right,
you
yeah.
know, you get the
Sure.
the
See that one a lot.
So to feel like we can complete the motion, I'll tell students, you know, we're trying to chip balls and hold that finish. I force them to count to 3, and they still usually won't do it.
Yep.
But to count to 3, 1, 2, 3, because for many, man, that's a lot of hip turn.
And what do they
man,
get to? What, 1.5, and then they're...
they don't even count. They just look at the ball, and
Yeah.
they're like, oh yeah, I totally forgot. So to do a few practice strokes, clubs on line, 1, 2, 3, right? Everything's pretty centered. The club's not pulled too much to my side. The handle would be towards my belly button in front of my chest.
Yeah, yeah, let's do one more hit with that focus there.
So then as people would practice this, I'm a big fan of at least a 1-to-1 ratio. 1 rehearsal, 1, 2, 3, and then we essentially put that on the golf ball. I'm not trying to change 1, 2, 3. I'm not really trying to change from my rehearsal to the golf ball. So really, if we can make those rehearsals more meaningful, especially as we're trying to make a change, I see that be a big help.
Yeah, put that on the ball. I like that a lot. One other question that will come up a lot when someone's chipping and pitching is, how much wrist hinge should I use? Is this like wide arc Jason Day the right way to do it? Should I be a little narrow? What would you tell someone about that?
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this in another video. It really is a whatever works game. And some golfers, if they're too far low and inside, at times they'll need to feel some amount more wrists. If someone is too up and down, that person would need to feel less wrists. So it's really based on the individual and using that shaft plane reference, however you feel best to get that club online. Also, I give students the freedom to experiment. I say try 3 as wide as you can go, try 3 as wristy as you can go, and you just might find one that works better under pressure. And usually what that does is, as they're tinkering and they maybe don't use a camera, typically those wristy players tend to get the club more online. And they just find a way technically that's better without them really knowing that.
Yeah.
So in general, is there some amount of soft wrist set to make sure this club doesn't get too low and inside? Sure. So that's where the idea of no wrists, the idea of Jason Day, Steve Stricker, what they don't realize is Jason Day and Steve Stricker live on top of that plane. But when they try it, it's like, okay, no wrists.
Right.
This is simple.
Yeah, don't do that.
And I don't even let them swing through at that point. No need to see what that's gonna do.
I think having a reference point to come back to, like get the club consistently on playing for you guys, is a way to answer a lot of questions. So one more thing, Derek, last thing here is you talk a bunch in the videos, which I like a lot, about learning how to have the club consistently interacting with the ground. You know, like for a long time, I might have had a bad motion, stuck the club in the ground, and always tried to avoid it because of that, when maybe I was just doing it incorrectly. And so just, would you tell someone in their practice swings just to have a general idea of having the club consistently touching the turf?
Yes, so, in full swing, right, a full 7-iron is always a full 7-iron, but in short game, every swing length and ground interaction is different, right? In putting, the nice thing with putting, I don't have to teach someone to hit the ball. Right. Well, in short game and above, I do. So I like students to make a motion that reflects the distance, but also the ground interaction. So when I see someone do some practice swings too high above the ground in short game, I don't love it. And I'll say, hey, you know what? I think the speed was good, but let's go ahead and make that motion through the ground to our finish, because that's gonna make me believe that they're gonna hit a good shot. And we want to put all these things in our favor, and really something I do and a lot of my students do, and I'll move this just for this example, but this would be my exact order when I hit, is I would check my spot, I make my motion, and I just walk right in with that same motion. So nothing's different. I'm not trying to rethink, I'm not resetting. Those practice swings are actually part of my shot. They're very meaningful. So often I'll see people do these things that I'm like, man, I hope they don't do any of that. So I don't know why they're doing it right before they hit.
Yeah. And I unfortunately, I fall into that bucket, especially you saying that there. I'm like, gosh, I don't have a meaningful enough practicing when I play.
But at times I'll see, and I've even worked with some really good tour players who say, here's why I don't take a practice swing, because I don't want to see the club dig into the ground, or I don't want to see. So I understand it at times, but if we can make that practice swing more meaningful and really reflect what we want to do, I see that help a ton of golfers.
Love it. We're going to take a quick break for a second and show you the #1 skill you want to build along with this. Okay guys, so once you have the basic motion in and you're learning the basic motion, really the #1 skill to be able to take that out to the golf course is learning landing spots. And Derek talks about this in his programs, about being able to hit the landing spots, but also pick the correct landing spot. So we've got a towel out on the green there. Derek, when you're practicing this, obviously you have a general idea of where that is now, but you would walk someone through how to pick that and then ultimately learn how to hit that.
Yeah, so even to make it more simple, if you're a golfer and let's say you're at a carnival and there's a game and there's a bucket and you can win tickets by hitting it into a spot. Yeah. I've never seen anyone be good at this and be bad at short game, even if they don't pick spots, right? Because some people don't pick spots. I'm a huge fan of picking spots because it tells the whole story. Meaning if I hit my spot and that ball just jumps way past, it wasn't my chip's fault. It was either a bad spot, bad break. So I know that I don't really need to work on my chipping as much as my spot hitting. So that's what I call doing your job. So if I hit this towel, I'm doing my job. Whatever happens after that's essentially green reading, putt, break,
helps you with the diagnosis part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's where, man, if I'm beating up my spots, now generally, people stink because they can't hit their spot very good. So a lot of times you hit a bad shot because you're not even close to your spot.
Yeah.
But at this distance, maybe 10 to 15 yards or so, I like students and myself to be within about a club radius is what I'd call a good shot.
Okay.
Here. And then running through that routine is, right, I'd line up, I'm gonna make some meaningful rehearsals that reflect the distance I think I'm gonna need.
That's so important.
Right, and I'm really honing in on this spot, right? So I'm not just taking this spot lightly.
That was good.
Yeah,
pretty
that was
impressive.
very good. I don't mess around, man. That's
Derek
it.
said off camera he's pretty good at hitting the spots.
I'd put me with anyone. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
He made that look easy. It takes a little bit of practice there. And obviously, just real quick for someone who's watching there, in the beginning, they're going to just kind of guess at where that is and then learn how to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Put a couple random objects down and just guess. If you're struggling, and usually how it works is they're struggling with contact. So at that point, if they can't hit the ball, of course they're going to have no feel.
Yes.
So once we develop an online action, getting predictable contact, well, now you have a chance to progress and get to feel.
Yeah.
So at that point, I need them contacting the ball well with no feel, but then we can start to develop feel once we have a good form, good technique.
Yeah, dude, that's so freaking good. There's so much good stuff in there. And guys, we wanted that one to run a little bit longer. Like I'm imagining you coming back and watching this over and over and over, and this being really more of a master class and like a quick tip thing. The other thing is, you know, we talked about several things. That's like the whole book. Okay, you're gonna need to get good at the things we talked about forever. It's not like there's gonna be a new set of 5 next week or next month, right? It's just those things to come back to. So that might be a lot the first time you hear it, but keep coming back and watching this. This was so good. That's how you start to take that and start to learn the skill with the landing zones. And with a little bit of time with the technique, a little bit of time with the landing zones, you should see much better results with this. And I'm telling you, the stealth spin secrets that I mentioned that Derek did with Performance Golf, we're gonna put the link down below and give you a special discount on this for those of you watching this. It is unbelievable. I watched through the whole thing. There's literally a video at the end, it's like an hour and a half. It's its own masterclass on short game. So if you want more of this, we'll put that link down below. Any questions, as always, leave us a comment down below.